is your 10-minute warning. Big Ten TED Live starts in 10 minutes. Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live.
This is me trying to contain my excitement. This is me trying to just not explode in excitement about Nebraska and Minnesota about to kick things off in a mere 8 days. Folks, it has been a long offseason, folks. We have made it finally. Week 0 is right around the corner, of course. No Big Ten games in week 0, folks. We are here. We are here. We're going to be kicking off that football. The pads are going to be crunching. It is going to happen. We are talking about football in the last month or so, 4 to 6 weeks. Hell, you could probably even go back the whole summer. We've been talking a lot of realignment. We've been talking about those folks on the West Coast, but they're not here yet. You know who's here? Those 14 teams behind me on the flag. We're going to be talking about 2023 Big Ten football here tonight on Big Ten Ted Live. I'm going to put it all out on the line, folks. I'm going to reveal my predictions, and I'm going to say this as a precursor. I'm not maybe the most confident in my predictions. There is a lot of toss-up games. There's a little bit of uncertainty because remember, look at that flag behind me. J.J. McCarthy comes back at Michigan. Talia Tungavailoa comes back at Maryland. And then you have guys that didn't start every game. Guys like Ethan Kaliak-Manis. Guys like Gavin Wimsatt. There's not a ton of returning starting quarterbacks, and we know the quarterback position is the most important on the football field. So there's a lot of uncertainty, folks, but I am just brimming and exploding with excitement, although I'm working the night of Nebraska and Minnesota. Centennial and Coon Rapids High School football here in Minnesota needs to be broadcasted, so I need to be there. We start high school football on Thursday nights here in Minnesota to kind of get a head start in the Labor Day weekend a little bit. But here's how tonight's show is going to go. Because sometimes, and the chat is pretty hot so far here tonight, I'm sure it's going to get hotter here as we continue throughout the show. I actually recorded my predictions last night because sometimes when I'm doing these segments, I can see that chat out of the corner of my eye, and sometimes, I'm going to be honest, maybe I need to get a little bit better at hosting. Sometimes I get a little bit distracted from that chat. So I wanted to make sure my complete focus was on my predictions. So I recorded that predictions video last night. And this is not just who's going to end up which record, who's going to go to Indianapolis, all right? That is going to happen at the end of the video when I do play it back here. But I predict every single Big Ten game. And I feel like I needed to predict every single Big Ten game to get to the result that I eventually got to. I preface this by saying that I'm not maybe the most confident in my picks because there are a lot of toss-ups. There's a lot of, we know about the Big Three in the Big Ten East. We know there's 4. Maybe 5, who knows, maybe 6 teams that could win the Big Ten West, folks. I think this is a very unpredictable season. When we look back on my predictions, maybe sometime in January, you're going to look back and there's going to be a lot of people pointing, Ted, you were wrong about this. Ted, you were wrong about that. But that's the beauty of predictions. Everybody's got them, but I'm going to put them all out on the line here tonight. So we're going to do that. I'm going to play back that video. I'm still going to be around. I'm still going to be sitting here behind the computer, going to put up your chats as well on the screen and be featuring some chats during the playback of my predictions as well. Curious to see your live reactions of my predictions here. We're going to have, after that's all said and done, we're going to start bringing on guest after guest after guest. It looks like we've got 5 of them here tonight. Here's who we're going to bring on. We got Brant Henson, the founder of Big Banter. That's kind of a social media network of podcasts that was kind of formed, I believe, back in April. So he's going to be on here tonight as well. We got John Johnston stopping by from Corn Nation to kind of get a Nebraska perspective on all of this. Kent Peterson, host of the Casual Big Ten podcast, will be joining us. We've got Grant from the Big Time Boiler as well, coming fresh off that appearance from the Eyes on Big podcast. And then we've got the one, the only, the Don of Wisconsin football, Scary Alvarez, is going to be joining us as well with a little bit of a Wisconsin perspective. This is what I was able to get, so I apologize if I'm not getting every single team perspective in the Big Ten, but this is going to be a very fun show tonight. Very much looking forward to this one as well. Very curious to see your input as well once we get these guests on and once we really start talking about Big Ten football. Folks, it is here. You're pumped. I'm pumped. It is time to put it all out on the line. It is time for predictions. I'm going to be here featuring your chats. But this is how I think Big Ten football is going to go down in 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, we have survived the dead of winter. We've survived the sloppiness of spring and the scorching hot summer. It is finally time for football. It is finally time for Big Ten football. It is finally time for me to put it all out on the line. It is finally time for my Big Ten predictions for the year 2023.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Man, it's been a while since I've been this excited, I think, about a college football season. There are a lot of toss-up matchups. There's a lot of close matchups, folks. The East and the West divisions are going to have some spicy division championship implications type of matchups in the month of November. It is going to be a great Big Ten football season in 2023. Some of these matchups were very difficult to predict. I just want to preface this by saying that this was no easy task for yours truly and anybody that's predicting Big Ten football this year to make, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the depth of this conference here in year number one of this TV deal. Fox, CBS, NBC, they are going to get their money's worth this season. No question about that. Let's dive right into the predictions, and we're going to start, of course, in week number one. No week zero games for the Big Ten Conference. Let's start first with that Thursday night game. Nebraska, I think, is going to get better as the season goes along, as the years go along under Matt Rule, but expecting them to go on the road to a Minnesota team that has controlled this series as of late, I think is a little bit of a tall task. I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if Nebraska wins, but I just think Minnesota being at home, everything kind of fits into place for the Gophers to get a big first win in that one over there. Watch out, Illinois, Toledo, the MAC champs last season. That's not going to be the easiest start to the season over there in week number one as well. Let's move on to week number two. You know, a couple of matchups that I really want to highlight in here. Let's start first with Illinois and Kansas. The Illini going on the road to Big 12 country. Jalen Daniels and this Kansas offense. That was the darling of college football in the first half of last season. This is an offense that returns a lot. That secondary for Illinois is going to be tested. Okay, when you look at Taz Nicholson, when you look at Matthew Bailey, when you look at some of the guys back there in that secondary, they're going to have to step up. This is an early challenge for Illinois, but I think the Illini can play their style of ball, maybe force a turnover or two. As good as the Kansas offense may be, I think this Illinois defense and this defensive front is especially good as well, kind of in that same category, maybe even a notch above their defense when you compare it to Kansas's offense. Big matchup is going to be that pass rush. I think Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph could be living in this Kansas backfield, but I think they're going to play their style of play, Burt Ball, smash mouth type of football. Iowa and Iowa State. Okay, it would be a disappointment if Iowa does not go into Jack Trice Stadium and come out with a victory, considering how shorthanded the Cyclones are. Hopefully Iowa doesn't lose some players due to this gambling investigation kind of going on at Iowa right now. But that's a chance for Iowa to really make a statement, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and I think they're going to do that. Wisconsin and Washington State. This is tricky, right? Washington, we know, or I should say Wisconsin, installing that new offense. Okay, well, Washington State beat the Badgers last year. Cam Ward is back. The secondary for Wisconsin, maybe still kind of getting up to speed. It's kind of taken a little bit of a dip. Maybe isn't as good as past years in that secondary. That could be a tricky game early on. A lot of expectations for the Badgers. I think that one's going to be close. At night in Pullman, over there in that football game. And then you, of course, come on, Nebraska. We got to beat down Colorado. I think some good players have come into Colorado, but when you just have this much turnover, it's really hard to gel together when everybody's new, kind of coming from all different destinations in the country. I think Colorado right now is a reality show with Deion Sanders. Nebraska's got to bring them back down to reality. Come on, Huskers. Let's just do it for everybody around college football right now. Let's head on to week number 3. Why don't we? The game in the middle is what really sticks out to me. Drew Aller's first big test on the road, big noon Saturday on Fox against Illinois. Okay, they would have wins against Toledo. They'd have wins against Kansas. They'd be building a little bit of confidence as of late, but I just don't think Illinois has the firepower. I think that they're going to give Drew Aller some problems. Going on the road, facing a defense like this, I can't wait to see like a Johnny Newton versus Olufashanu type of matchup coming off the edge. That has me drooling, no question about that. When you look at offensive tackle versus defensive line type of matchups up front there. But I just think Penn State has too much firepower. Illinois doesn't have enough. Nittany Lions get it done in this one. Indiana and Louisville. This is a high-scoring matchup. Jeff Brom, the new head coach of the Cardinals. We know he's familiar with Tom Allen and the Hoosiers, but there's a lot of new personnel, I think, for both teams. This one's pretty tough to predict. I'll throw it to the Hoosiers kind of on a late field goal type of matchup over there. It's going to be tough for Michigan State, taking on one of the nation's best passing attacks in the Washington Huskies. Now, they get him in East Lansing this year, but this is going to be a future Big Ten matchup starting in 2024. But when you look at the weakness of Michigan State on the defensive side of the ball the last few years, it's been their secondary. That has really struggled. And like I mentioned, Michael Penix and these great wide receivers, this might be the second best wide receiver group in the country behind Ohio State. I think I'm being actually a little bit generous with that score right there. And then Minnesota, North Carolina. You're taking on one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Drake May. Now, I trust Joe Rossi. I trust what they got going on, but this is a defense that's going to take some time, I think, to really get to their full potential this season. Taking on North Carolina this early, I could see Minnesota going on the road, playing PJ ball, controlling the time of possession, keeping the ball away from Drake May, because this is not a good North Carolina defense. But I think it's just going to be very difficult for the secondary specifically. I get Tyler Nubin, I get Justin Wally, but this is going to be a big challenge for them. I just don't think they quite get it done against the North Carolina Tar Heels. Let's move on to week number 4. The first game I want to look at in this week, Ohio State at Notre Dame. All the questions about quarterback at Ohio State, Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. One guy, Kyle McCord, had every opportunity when Devin Brown was hurt coming out of spring. He had every opportunity to establish himself as the number 1 guy. Didn't get it done. There's still some questions as to who's going to start. Who knows what the quarterback situation is going to be at this time of the season. Sam Hartman is going to be the best quarterback on the field in South Bend, Indiana that night. But look at the other positions. I think Ohio State has big advantages on the defensive line. Obviously, they got big advantages on the perimeter and the playmaking ability. I think Ohio State is just going to make a couple more plays than Notre Dame will in this one. I just don't think that they have the skill players that Ohio State does. I think the Buckeyes get it done. How about Iowa and Penn State? The whiteout. Okay, this is the second game in a row where Drew Aller is taking on a really good defense. Illinois and now Iowa. I think Drew Aller gets it done, but it's not going to be easy. I think it's going to be more Nick Singleton and Katron Allen that do well in this matchup. It would not surprise me to see this one fairly low scoring early, and then the dam kind of breaks. I think where the difference in this game is Penn State's defense versus Iowa's offense. I think the Penn State defense can really hold Cade McNamara and this Hawkeye offense in control, and they can really contain them as well. Watch out on a Friday night, Wisconsin at Purdue. I'm going to be talking a good amount about Purdue as these predictions go along. This is a tricky one. Early in the season, Friday night, Ross-Ade Stadium. Wisconsin had a challenge against Washington State early in the season. Watch out for that one, folks. This one's going to be close, but Wisconsin comes away with it with a late drive to give themselves the advantage and give themselves the victory. Let's move on to week number 5. I'm going to start in the middle once again with Illinois and Purdue. They don't get it done against Wisconsin, but they get it done against Illinois. It's very difficult for me to see chalk for Purdue, right? You win your non-conference, you win your last couple of games against Northwestern and Indiana, and you go 5-7. I think they're going to get it done somewhere, and I think this is where they're going to get it done personally. Okay, I think Purdue has a better quarterback. I think they got better talent in the backfield with Devin Mockabee. I think this defense is under Ryan Walters and Kevin Kane. This defense is going to get better as the year goes on. And those two guys that I just mentioned, they know all about Illinois football, right? They were in Champaign the last few seasons. They know exactly the type of game plan that Brett Bielema is going to look to put out there. Remember, Purdue was able to win last year in Champaign. Over the last 15 to 20 years, the Boilermakers have been in control of this series. I think this is where Purdue gets it done. This is a big win for Ryan Walters early in his tenure. I like Iowa in a close one against Michigan State. Michigan State, I think, is going to be a little bit better than people think. Michigan, Nebraska. It's just hard for me to imagine the Huskers really doing a lot on offense against what Michigan has on the defensive side of the football, especially up front. I think it's possible that you could really see some of those great Michigan pass rushers really attack these Nebraska offensive tackles in this matchup as well. Michigan gets it done, and I think they're in control for most of this football game, to be honest with you. Let's move on to week number 6. Speaking of Michigan, this game's a little bit tougher. Going on the road to Nebraska and then on the road to Minnesota is not the easiest 2-game stretch right out the gate here for the Michigan Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh. I think Minnesota gives them a little bit of a challenge in Minneapolis, but once again, it's just hard for me to imagine the Gophers really going tick for tack with a team like Michigan. Michigan has the potential to go 15-0, folks. This is a fantastic Michigan team, a team that has made back-to-back playoffs and is returning a lot of production from last year's team that nearly made the national championship game over there. I like Illinois edging Nebraska. Like I said, Nebraska's going to get better. This is going to be a close, competitive game. I think you're really going to see Nebraska start to make improvements, but Illinois has played really well as of late against the Cornhuskers, and I think Illinois plays a physical style of football. I think that Illinois offensive line can control the Nebraska Cornhuskers really up front. That's going to be a very interesting matchup as well. Iowa has had trouble with Purdue in the past, but I think it's going to be hard. I think that defense for the Hawkeyes going up against Purdue going to be an interesting challenge, but I think the Iowa defensive backs match up very well with the Purdue wide receivers that maybe don't have a standout guy that they've had in the last couple of seasons. Let's move on to week number 7. Ohio State has had trouble at Purdue as of late. I don't think that happens here. I think they take care of business. Iowa, Wisconsin. This is a game that I think could end up determining who makes it to Indianapolis. All right, so this is going to be a fun matchup because we know the Iowa secondary, how good they are. Cooper DeJean, the turnover machine, Quinn Schulte, Xavier Nwamka. We know about all those guys. We know maybe that Tanner Mordecai can, maybe throw it into tight spaces and try to push a window as well. The college version of Brett Favre and having a guy like Cooper DeJean on the other side, that could mix well for the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is one of those matchups that I really went back and forth. I think it's a home field advantage, I think, that makes the difference in this football game. I think Wisconsin learns early on that you're not going to win this football game by Tanner Mordecai throwing the ball 30 times, 35 times. I think this is a running type of game with Ches Malusi and Braylon Allen. They find a way to win. My gut tells me, I went back and forth on this one for a month and a half. I think my gut tells me that Wisconsin finds a way to win at home. Illinois gets that win on the road at Maryland as well. I think Illinois can just play a more physical brand of football than Maryland. I'm just not sure about the Maryland trenches. I think by this time, that secondary is going to be improving, and they're going to need to improve to face off against this Maryland passing attack. Let's move on to the next week. Week number 8. Okay, Wisconsin, we got a big win. We got an emotional win. We're feeling great. Everybody's on the Badger train. And then here comes Brett Bielema. He does it for the second straight year in Champaign this time. Illinois gets a stop late. Wisconsin has the ball driving. Tanner Mordecai throws an interception. He turns it over. Illinois finds a way to win. This is their big win here early in the season. You got Penn State and Ohio State this week as well. Folks, these East Division games are a coin flip. It's so hard to predict this one. I'm looking forward, kind of like the Illinois-Penn State one. I'm looking forward to the defensive line matchup of Ohio State against the offensive line at Penn State. I think the home field advantage gives this, the home field advantage in Columbus gives this the advantage to the Buckeyes. I think they're going to have it figured out. You would think by this point in the season, by this Penn State game, they better have it figured out at quarterback, and they're going to start to establish a rhythm on the offensive side of the football. Maybe Penn State can capitalize on some things in the Ohio State secondary, but this is going to be a challenge, I believe, running the football here against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tommy Eichenberg is one of the very best linebackers in the country. Can Ohio State be stout in the middle of that defense? I think that's going to be an interesting. This is all going to depend who has the football last. So the Kalen King, Marvin Harrison Jr. matchup is going to be spectacular. I'm looking forward to that. How about Minnesota and Iowa? This is going to be classic Big Ten football. But you can't convince me right now that the Gophers go into Kinnick Stadium and beat the Iowa Hawkeyes. That was the big tipping point for me. Iowa is a really good team this year. They've improved a lot on the offensive side of the ball. I think they get it done late against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Michigan State. I just don't foresee this one being a blowout. That's what considering the heat from that game last season, and Michigan State, I think, is an improved team. No matter how good Michigan is, this one's on the road in East Lansing. The last time these two teams met in East Lansing, it was a win for Sparty. I think this one's fairly close, but Michigan pulls away in the end. This is a week that you better circle on your Big Ten calendar, by the way. Some juicy matchups, some matchups that could decide a lot. Let's go to week number 9. All right, Wisconsin. Now you're reeling a little bit. Now you're coming off a loss. You kind of come back to reality. You come back to earth a little bit, and then you got to play Ohio State at Camp Randall. I think they're going to respond well. Remember, Ohio State has to play Penn State and then Wisconsin in back-to-back weeks. That is not a very easy back-to-back stretch. They are going to be tested against the run. How stout is the interior of that Ohio State defensive line going to be? I think we're really going to find that out in this matchup as well. I talked about Nebraska turning the corner. This is where you kind of start to see it. Winning a close game. I think they get it done close against the Purdue Boilermakers. It's very hard for me to imagine Minnesota going undefeated at home. I think this is the one where they lose at home in conference. This is the Michigan State win after that drubbing last year in East Lansing. This is the Michigan State win where maybe people start to see the positive side of what Mel Tucker is doing with the green and white. Let's move on to week number 10, folks. Illinois, and specifically Brett Bielema, has owned Minnesota. But this is going to be an up and down year for the Gophers. I think it's going to be a back and forth back half of the schedule for the Illinois Fighting Illini as well. It's not even though they don't play the Michigans of the world, the Ohio States of the world, it's still a decent gauntlet kind of coming down the pike for the Illinois Fighting Illini. I'm not buying into this narrative that Minnesota is going to be this 5-5 team, maybe the 6-6 team. This is a solid Minnesota team, and they're going to get some decent and solid Big Ten wins. I think this is it right here where they have a late drive. They find a way to get the job done. Michigan State goes on the road, and now they're putting together some confidence here kind of in the middle of the season. I think they beat Nebraska. That front seven on defense for Michigan State could give this Nebraska offensive line some troubles if the Huskers don't improve up front over there. Let's move on to week number 11. I think Ohio State is going to have a heyday against that Michigan State secondary as well. Minnesota Purdue, I think, is another really close game. This one can go either way. Of course, Purdue got it done last season, but I think Minnesota holds off the Boilermakers late this time. Of course, the game of this week is Michigan at Penn State. Holy crap. I think this is the matchup. Everybody loves Michigan, Ohio State. Penn State, Ohio State has been a great game over the years. This is the one that I have circled. This is the game I'm most looking forward to this season. This is a really deep East Division, and I know Michigan is as good as they've been in a long, long time. But Penn State is also as good as they've been in a long, long time. I think by this point in the season, Drew Aller is going to be hitting on all cylinders. We're going to see just how good of a quarterback Drew Aller is, and I think this is the game where he really vaults himself into a new stratosphere in his first season as a starting quarterback. I think Penn State can get it done in the run game. I think they can get it done in the throw game as well. Once again, this is a gut. There's a lot of coin flips in this one. This is a coin flip. I think the home field advantage goes the way of Penn State. They can't lose to Michigan and Ohio State forever. I think this is where you really start to see Penn State and James Franklin really start to turn the heads of some people nationally. I say Penn State gets it done against the Michigan Wolverines. Let's move on to week number 12, folks. Nebraska plays Wisconsin tough, right? You see some more close games, and I know this is going to hurt Husker fans, but I think you're going to lose a few close games. I think you're going to win some close games, but I also think you're going to lose some close games because I think the Big Ten and the Big Ten West is just very deep this season. Wisconsin gets it done, though, in that particular matchup. Maryland plays some good teams late in the season, and I think they're going to be competitive against some of these teams. Now, although their record, when all is said and done, may not be what Maryland fans maybe are looking for, they're going to play some teams very competitively. They played Michigan tough last season. I think they're going to do the same in College Park. Illinois and Iowa, they're going to score a few more points than they did a year ago. But I think Iowa might have the advantage at the quarterback position. We'll see where we're at kind of at this point in the season. I think Iowa is a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball. The defense and the home field advantage. Folks, it's not easy to go into Kinnick Stadium and win. Okay, that's kind of one thing that when I was looking at the schedule and I continue to go down the line, Iowa's got some key games at home that I think are really going to help them out as this thing goes along. Let's advance, folks, to week number 13. This is where everything is decided. Okay, with a win, Iowa could get to the Big Ten championship. Nebraska spoils the party because they come in at 5-6, looking to get to a bowl game. They get it done on Black Friday against the Iowa Hawkeyes. They knock Iowa out of the Big Ten championship game with that win on Friday. Now, let's go to Wisconsin and Minnesota. So Wisconsin's in at this point. They're going to Indianapolis. Minnesota, I think, is a little bit more motivated than Wisconsin is right now. I think this is another big win for the Minnesota Golden Gophers as they kind of continue to kind of flip the series like it was a few years back where Wisconsin was winning all of those matchups as well. Purdue gets to bowl eligibility with a win over Indiana. Michigan defeats Ohio State. I don't think it's going to be quite the margin that it has been in years past, but Michigan wins over Ohio State in this matchup. I think they do it the way they've done the last few years. They are more physical at the point of attack. There's really good pass rushers, linebackers, wide receivers, running backs for Ohio State. It's the interior. That Michigan offensive line is a bunch of big boys that are they could push Ohio State around in this matchup, but the skill positions is kind of something to watch. I think Ohio State is going to be closer this year, but once again, this is going to be 3 consecutive losses for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Okay, how does this thing all shake out when it all is said and done? It's crazy, folks. This is how it shakes out when it's all said and done. We have a 3-way tie atop the Big Ten East, and it goes all the way down to the 5th tiebreaker. That 5th tiebreaker is the combined record of your cross-division, in this case, West Division opponents. Ohio State plays Wisconsin, Purdue, and Minnesota. all teams that are 500 or better. They have a 22-14 combined record against those teams. Michigan and Penn State, as crazy as this is, 19-17, both their combined opponents from the Big Ten West. So that, even though Ohio State lost to Michigan in the final game of the season, Ohio State finds their way to the Big Ten Championship. Wisconsin, due to the head-to-head, takes it against the Iowa Hawkeyes. You see how many teams are bowl eligible in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is very deep this season. In the middle, there's a lot of teams that could go a lot of places. There's teams that could win 8 or 9 games. They could also win 4 or 5 games as well. So we've got Ohio State and we've got Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game over there. So who gets it done? It's the Buckeyes that get it done. I think Wisconsin plays pretty well in this one. I think this is an offensive game kind of going back and forth, but Wisconsin just doesn't have the talent in the secondary to really match up with the Ohio State Buckeyes in this matchup. I think Michigan or Penn State, and maybe both of them. Maybe we get 3 teams in the college football playoff. Now you can probably hear me. Those are my predictions right there. I know this is tough. This is not easy to do. I just want to say this. There's a lot of depth in this league. And just because Ohio State makes their way to the Big Ten Championship, it's the way the tiebreaker shakes out for me. Is Michigan better? Is Penn State better right now? I think that's to be debated. And we are going to get into some of these debates here as this kind of comes along right now. So those are the predictions. It is now time to talk all things Big Ten. With that, I am pleased to be welcomed by Brant Henson. He is the founder of Big Banter, a podcast network, social media, all things Big Ten that really launched recently this spring. Brant, thanks for being here.
Hello, Ted. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to hop on the show with you.
Boy, I tell you what, this was not easy. This was not easy to do from a prediction side of thing. I know you're an Ohio State guy. You went to the university out there in the state of Ohio. Let's start first with the Ohio State Buckeyes. How do you think this team stacks up specifically amongst the big 3 in that East Division, or the other 2, the big 3, including Ohio State in the East Division?
Well, it's really, really tough to predict, like you said. All 3 teams have a lot of strengths, but there's a few weaknesses on all teams too. I guess more so question marks than weaknesses, because these 3, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, are probably 3 of the strongest teams in the entire nation. I have them all ranked in my top 5 heading into the season. I think it's going to be the most competitive. The East is going to be the most competitive it's been in years, just with all those teams being at that high of a level.
These are all playoff teams. That's the way I see it. I look at the offense, the defense, the special teams. You've broken it down. If you follow Big Banter on Twitter, you've seen all kinds of top 14 rankings throughout the spring and the summer and leading up to this college football season. So we know, of course, that Michigan game has gone the way of the Wolverines those past 2 seasons. Is there a game outside of that really concerns? Of course, you're probably going to look to that Penn State game, but what are some kind of sneaky games on this Buckeye schedule that Scarlet and Gray fans should watch out for?
Yeah, so for me, I really think this is the hardest schedule I've seen Ohio State have in years. Just given that we play a ton of really, really sound teams on the road. It starts with, I wouldn't say that I'm really scared about Indiana in week 1, but still opening with a Big Ten opponent in week 1 on the road with a new quarterback, a new offensive line. We're gonna have to work some things out in that game for sure. It could be one that's like close at halftime and then we pull away, something like that. But the game that really concerns me, the first one that really concerns me, is that Notre Dame game.
Yeah,
another road game. I think it's a night game, and it's the first time in years we've seen Notre Dame with a competent quarterback with Sam Hartman under center. Like they might be able to open up that offense a bit, and that's really what's been holding them back the past few years. So that one really scares me. And then the other one I have circled is at Wisconsin, the Luke Fickell rematch with Ohio State. I think he's brought in a ton of transfers and really revamped that team. And going on the road, that's not an easy environment.
Boy, and I believe that this is the first time that a Ryan Day coach team will go into Camp Randall Stadium as well. When I kind of dissect that matchup specifically, that is one that kind of stands out as well to me. Wisconsin's defense may be lacking a little bit in the secondary. Obviously, we know the passing ability of this Ohio State team as well. So you cover over at Big Banter, your network of podcasts, right? You got team podcast for football, got some basketball ones kind of sprinkled in there as well. So you've got a wide range of a look, a 10,000-foot view kind of on this conference overlooking your network over there. What's a surprise team? I'll kind of come back with mine, but what's a surprise team that you're looking at that maybe isn't on a lot of people's minds that could maybe come up and maybe challenge for a division title?
When I think about surprise teams, I'm looking in the West just because the East, right. There's no possible way that one of those three teams doesn't win the East. I mean, it could be any of those three. But I mean, Maryland's good, but they're not going to compete on that level. When I'm looking in the West for a surprise team, I really like Iowa. I think they're a next tier down. I mean, they're one of the top West contenders, I guess, but they're kind of I would put them almost pretty close to that tier of those top three East teams. If they can get the offense rolling, that's the big question mark with Brian Ferentz still there. But the defense is legitimate, and I think they could really put up a fight.
And of course, will they be full strength? Noah Shannon right now, it appears, is going to be suspended for the season. Of course, the appeal is kind of coming back to the NCAA. That's a whole different situation. What's going to happen? We know Iowa State has taken a lot of hits, as I mentioned in my predictions video there, that says Iowa should be able to go in to Ames and win, considering Hunter Dekkers is out. The running back that I believe was pretty good is out of there as well. I look at Illinois specifically. They have a schedule that does not have Michigan. They have a schedule that does not have Ohio State. Now, they're probably not going to beat Penn State, but they get them early, and that's Drew Aller's first really big test. So if they are going to pull off a huge upset, get it early against maybe a first-year starting quarterback. I want to hear your thoughts on the Illini right now. I love Brett Bielema as a coach. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin. You could probably understand why I love Bert, going to 3 consecutive Rose Bowls. How do you view Illinois? Is this a team, do you think, that can realistically challenge for the West Division title with the Iowas, Wisconsins, and the likes there?
Yes, I fully agree with you. That was actually the team I was about to say before I said Iowa. I was kind of between those two. I mean, obviously they lost a lot of talent with Witherspoon, Sidney Brown, off to the NFL, Chase Brown on offense. But the defensive line is legit. Returning Johnny Newton and returning Keith Randolph, they're going to plug the middle better than anybody else in the Big Ten. The offense can get humming with Luke Altmaier. Been hearing a lot of great things about him. And then that Week 3 game against Penn State, it's at Illinois. If they get the place bumping, I mean, they could easily pull off the upset. Like you said, it's going to be Aller's real first test. And here's the
thing I look at when I look at Illinois, the run game. What's going to happen? Josh McCray, remember, a couple of years last year, he was kind of banged up with injury. A couple of years ago, he ran. He was a solid number 2 option behind Chase Brown. 500-something yards. I think he got into the end zone a fair amount of time. If Josh McCray is healthy, I'm not saying he's going to be 1,000 or 1,500-yard back, but it's a solid option. I think the more time that goes by, he's going to be the 1. Reggie Love is going to be the 2. That secondary, you mentioned that secondary. Devin Witherspoon obviously not there anymore. Sidney Brown not there anymore. But folks, this is not some secondary that's made out of a bunch of 2 and 3 stars back there. Taz Nicholson is decent. Matthew Bailey had a solid bowl game against Mississippi State. Do you think that the second, of course, that's generational type of talent when you look at Illinois, Devin Witherspoon and Sidney Brown. But are you kind of in my kind of bubble where I think Illinois secondary is going to get better, and I just don't think it's maybe going to take a dip as maybe some other people think?
No, I agree. And bringing in Jim Leonard to coach him up is definitely a great hire. Over at Big Banter, Illini Cast is our Illini focused podcast. They're big Matthew Bailey fans. Think he's going to have a breakout season this year. I've watched a bit of his highlights. I watched a bit of him last year in the bowl game. He was super good. So I think he's a guy that can really take that next step.
So you look at Illinois as maybe a team that can take a surprise. Let's talk about the Big Ten West here for just a minute, because the more I break this thing down, it is, and who knows what's going to happen with Iowa, because if things kind of start to, if they lose some pieces and this whole can gets opened up even more. How many teams do you think right now, as we're talking here on August 23rd, 2023, how many teams have a shot to make it to Indianapolis? I think it could be as high as maybe 6. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I fully agree with you. I think literally every team other than Northwestern is in the mix right now. I really think anybody could do it. I see Craig Mockabee there.
Uncle Craig in the house, baby. Let's go.
I think his Boilermakers could legitimately do it. I mean, they've kind of upset people in the past few years. Why not this year?
Yeah, and one thing I've gone back and forth with Craig on Twitter. Don't sleep on Purdue. And man, let's kind of, as long as we're kind of going in that direction, we talked about Luke Altmaier getting a lot of praise in camp. Man, a lot of people love Hudson Card. I'll talk about, and we're going to have our guy Grant from the Big Time Boiler later on talking about all things Purdue, but I want to hear your thoughts on this because you put Hudson Card up there. You've got Devin Mockabee, which was close to a 1,000-yard rusher last season. Everybody, I thought in March, February, kind of those months where I'm like, yeah, Purdue, they're going to take a drop. But the more I look at Purdue, the more I'm like, they might be able to pull off a few upsets. What do you think?
I 100% agree with you there. I mean, they're dealing with a lot of turnover from the coaching staff to a lot of guys on defense, plugging and playing their pass catchers as well. I mean, Payne Durham and Charlie Jones, losing those two, that was like their entire passing offense, obviously rotating out Aiden O'Connell. But I think bringing in Hudson Card is not necessarily a downgrade under Aiden O'Connell. He's been going crazy in camp. He was always very consistent when he was in the game at Texas. I think it's a good swap, and I think Purdue can definitely contend.
Now, when you look at Texas, of course, bringing in guys, Quinn Ewers, of course, spent the year at Ohio State and then transferred back to Texas. Arch Manning, of course. With that type of talent coming in, I never thought they'd really give Hudson Card a chance. You look at his numbers, he's close to a 70% completion rate. I just feel like they never gave him full control of this offense. And Purdue is going to reap the rewards of everything that is going on over there. Brant, really appreciate you joining me. Let's talk about Big Banter just a little bit here quickly before you go. A network of podcasts. Where can people find all this stuff? Website, social media. Now's your time to shine.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't heard of Big Banter, we're brand new. Just started up this spring. Our goal is to really deliver you the best Big Ten content on the web, aside from Big Ten Ted here, of course. But we have a website that just launched at bigbantersports.com. You can find blog posts there. You can find the links to all the podcasts that within our network. So I definitely recommend going and checking out the podcasts for your specific team that you root for, because great content being pushed out all over the place. Also on Twitter, that's where our main social media is, just at Big Banter Sports. You can find all of our fun lists that you mentioned. We threw out some superlatives today for a bunch of different players, a bunch of little fun preseason awards. So yeah, some cool stuff out there. Definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet.
All right, thanks for joining us. All things Big Banter over there. So we continue to move on here, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the show. If I can get the technology right, it's all about pushing the right buttons here today. If I can get that right, we might be able to do something here. Sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out the technology. Now we're just going to keep on moving on. We've got our next guest joining us. The president of Huskerland, Mr. John Johnston, joining us here tonight. I'm pumped to be talking to you, John, here. I'm not sure when you were elected the president of Huskerland, but I know all things Nebraska comes through the Johnston house.
Oh, my God. I wasn't sure when I was elected president either. But I guess here we are.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So many responsibilities all of a sudden.
Put more on John's plate here, as if he didn't have enough already. Okay. Yeah. So my Big Ten predictions, I've got Nebraska sitting there at 6-6. We'll kind of start with that. Your Huskers, of course, if you don't know, John Johnston, Corn Nation, you can find him on YouTube on the website, cornnation.com as well. We'll get into that a little bit later here in this segment, but 6-6. I know Nebraska fans have, how do I put this? High expectations year after year after year. Is that something that exists? 6-6. Where do you kind of view that? Is that kind of where you think they slot in as well this year?
I think that's pretty much like 80 to 90% of Husker fans' expectations. I think everybody's just, everybody's exhausted with having we're going to win the world, and then we fall on our face. And I think pretty much everybody is like, just get to a bowl game, please, so we can stop hearing about how bad we are and how many years it's been since a bowl game. I mean, everybody's always hopeful because Matt Rule won the offseason.
Again, they won it again.
Yeah,
Nebraska did.
Yes, yeah. We do this every year, but when it comes down to it, what are we now? Well, we're almost a week away.
8 days.
From the beginning of the season. Yeah. So it's time to actually, the talking has been good, but the showing is about to start.
So this is I like to think that this is a family-friendly program. You have let's call it a 3-line phrase that you've had that was coined. The last time Nebraska, I believe, came to Minnesota is when that all started as well. Let's talk about if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll keep it family friendly here for now. You can go over to Coordination over there and check it out. Nebraska and Minnesota. I'm excited. This is the Big Ten on Thursday nights. The Fox to start the season. They've been putting a good Big Ten primetime game out there. Excited about this one between the Huskers and the Gophers. I had Minnesota topping Nebraska 28-20 in my predictions. What do the Huskers have to do I think this would be an upset, right? If they go into Minneapolis and to beat the Gophers.
Well, I did kind of a preview video a couple of days ago, and I started out by saying I'd give Nebraska about a 30% chance to win at Minnesota. Here's the thing. Nebraska's offensive line and defensive line, well, maybe not so much the defensive line, but the offensive line has been probably one of the worst college football offensive lines now for 2-3 years. They've been terrible. I mean, atrocious. Words that I could say that would not be family friendly to describe our offensive line. So I think going into this game, what you want to see if you're Nebraskan is you want to see an offensive line that's functional. You want to see an offensive line that can actually run block. So in order for Nebraska to win this game, we have to do two things. It comes down to the lines. And both of the problem with Nebraska's lines are, number one, they weren't very good. And, last year's dysfunction was just, nobody was going to get anywhere with that. But they've kind of also been ignored. So the depth really isn't there. I think the offensive line has, 5 or 6 decent guys. But if they get like a Ben Scott, who's probably going to be a starting center, injured, then it's really going to be tough. The defensive line has to stop Minnesota running the ball. Minnesota extends possessions. That's what they do. I think in my video, I said, if you look at time of possession for Minnesota the last 4 years, they're in the top 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And they do that. They keep other teams' offense off the field. So in order for Nebraska to win this game, we have to become Minnesota. Yeah. I think right now, when you look at Nebraska, it's embarrassing to think that Minnesota has done to Nebraska what we've always wanted to do to other teams. That's be more physical, beat people up, make them feel it, and make them want to get off the field. And when you watch my colorful video that went viral was largely based on that. It was just, it's been horrifying to watch. So it's, we don't know really what Matt Rule's going to do. We can speculate. And I think really to beat Minnesota, we have to be better. I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Let's say
we have to be a better Minnesota than Minnesota. That's who we want to be. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of tragic to say that as far as Nebraska has fallen, but PJ Fleck's a good coach. Everybody has this kind of, I think something popped up there that says he's a weirdo. Well, yeah, he's a weirdo, but he's a decent coach.
He wins games.
Yes, he does. He wins games.
Like, that's where I'm at. You look at that 11-win season 2019. Everybody can throw out 2020 except for Alabama. And then you look at a couple of 9-4 seasons. Like, he's done one of the best coaching jobs, I believe, not only in the Big Ten West, but I think the entire conference as well. I think I saw it from Sam McEwen today that I think had a quote. I heard a tweet that said something to the effect of what you said, is that Minnesota has played kind of the way Nebraska wants to play, or I forgot forgot exactly what the quote was as well over there. So let's kind of dive into a couple of other bullet points for Nebraska. Xavier Betts, of course, leaving this team once again. It's unfortunate to kind of see after Matt Rule was kind of able to bring him back into the fold. You have a wide receiving core now. Without Xavier Betts, you're looking at guys like Marcus Washington, Billy Kemp, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, guys like that. Do you think the loss of Betts hurts this wide receiving group in this offense really a ton?
I think it hurts a lot, yeah.
Okay.
I think when he played, he was exciting. Yes. He had, the phrase flashes of brilliance.
Yeah.
You know, when he did some, jet sweeps, end rounds, whatever. I think he was just an exciting, dynamic, very quick player. And when you look at Nebraska's receiving core, there's not a lot of returning production there. Marcus Washington has been injured. Mm-hmm. And you kind of look at it and go, well, I think we're going to run the ball 89% of the time. Yeah. But, somebody has to step up there, and certainly Xavier Betts would have added a lot more to that group. And, I guess he's told Matt Rule his heart wasn't in it. And, if your heart's not in it, then don't waste everybody's time. And I, wish him the best of whatever he's going to do. I wish he was still in a Husker uniform, but apparently not.
The play that sticks out to me, I think it was that play a couple of years ago against Northwestern. I think they run an option, they pitch it out to him, and he takes it 80-something yards as well. That game has been like the bright spot over the past few years, it seems, for Husker football as well. Let's talk about another position on offense. Running back. Gabe Ervin Jr. was named RB1, the starter going forward. Is this more about Gabe Ervin Jr. rise to the occasion, or maybe is this Anthony Grant kind of plateauing a little bit at the running back position?
Well, I guess Ervin is number one because Anthony Grant's been fumbling a lot in practice, which kind of gives you an indication of something, that the coach actually pays attention to practice. And he looks at it and says, you know what, you're going to practice like you're going to play. And if you don't put the effort in practice, you're not going to play, So Gabe Ervin's, we've seen him run. I like the guy. I think the three of them, Gabe Ervin, Anthony Grant, and Ramir Johnson, are a really exciting trio of running backs. Out of the three, I'd honestly pick Ramir Johnson because I think he's the most explosive. But I think he's going to be a factor. You know what? He might be a better receiver than the receivers we have. And I think he adds a lot of stuff to the offense where he can be a running back who can take the ball, into the interior of the line and also wheel routes forever with Ramir. That's what I'm looking for. 48 rear wheel routes, all touchdowns. I'm getting him the homer part of me.
That's great. I love it. This is why I bring on people from different fan bases as well. So I want to ask, we're going to quickly finish on Ramir Johnson, and then we're going to kind of move on to the next thing. Why didn't he play last year? Why didn't Mark Whipple like this guy? I really thought that he could fit in well into what Whipple wanted to do, kind of opening up the offense a little bit. Was it injury? I don't think it was injury.
I think you could just say, why?
Why, and then finish it off.
The honest to God truth is, when I look back, I don't. I really have done my best to just say this is in the rear view mirror. It's like a bad relationship. And you just go, I'm looking forward to brighter, better days for Nebraska football. But I had no idea why he didn't play last year. No idea. I'm not even 100% sure that, Mark Whipple was doing everything. You know what I mean? It was such a mess with the coaching staff last year that, I don't know what to even say about that.
I'm excited. I think a lot of people are, and maybe even rival fan bases are saying, I'm not so happy that Matt Rule's the coach because I think Nebraska's going to take multiple steps up. Now, we talked about record, but let's kind of push that aside for just a minute. If this year is a successful year for Nebraska, what kind of football team do they look like?
A winning football team?
No, is it physical, high scoring?
Yeah, they have to be. You know what? If they're not physical, let's face it, 2024, the Big Ten completely changes. The world changes. Everything explodes. It gets put back together, and we all go, oh, my God, what have we done? And I think if you're Nebraskan, I'm a native Nebraskan. I grew up with this stuff, and you're not a physical football team, then you're not a football team.
Right.
So what do we? I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh my God, we have to run the ball all the time or stuff like that. I think you just have to do what you need to do to be successful. But that does include. uh, I mean, you got the Big Ten, you got the SEC. Both of those conferences, you better be good on the lines.
Right.
And I think I think most Nebraska fans would agree with me if I said what this team needs to look like is a team that can just beat the hell out of people physically with their lines on both sides of the ball. And if they can do that, then we'll all look at it and go, well, maybe we got a chance to be decent again.
I'm excited about what Nebraska can possibly bring. And I want to kind of fly 10,000 feet above the Big Ten here before I let you go. First thing as well, expansion out west. We're going to see, John, we're going to see you on the sunny beaches of LA, right? You're going to be getting your Starbucks and you're going to go sailgating in Seattle, I bet. We're going to see you out there in the middle of the field doing all that stuff. What are your thoughts on West Coast Big Ten expansion going forward?
Well, my first thought is that I better not be on too many beaches because I'm an old, pale, white guy whose legs haven't seen the sun for a very long time and people will go blind. But alignment, I guess Nebraska went through the whole alignment.
Yep.
You know, we dropped our rivalries, a decade ago. I think it's been fun for me personally, but I live in Minnesota, so I've been in the Big Ten area for a long time. I think it's exciting for people. Nebraska, there's tons of Nebraska alums on the West Coast, so it's going to be exciting for them. I don't buy into this whole thing where college football as we know it has been destroyed and it's all doom and gloom. I think it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be different for the teams that are joining. It's certainly going to be weird to play USC and UCLA, although Nebraska has played them at times over the years. I don't know about the whole. Yeah, I pictured myself on a beach. I have a daughter who lives in San Diego, so I've done that before. Certainly could go out there for games, but I think it's going to be more exciting than people. We can all talk about how rivalries are gone, but Nebraska versus Oklahoma, I grew up with. Yep. In Nebraska, Oklahoma, it stopped being a rivalry when we became the Big 12. I know Nebraskans like to hang on to that, but Oklahoma chose Texas. And there's words I could use again that wouldn't be family-friendly to describe that relationship. But, there it is. Coming into the Big Ten, we hate Iowa. Who doesn't hate Iowa, by the way? Seriously.
I saw some Iowa fans in the chat, so I think there's a couple of people that don't hate Iowa.
All right. Well, maybe they've been extorted to be Iowa fans. You know what I mean?
Oh, jeez.
But, it's been fun. I think it's been fun. I mean, we've latched on to Minnesota. Northwestern and Nebraska has played some really good games. God help their program now. Right. Wisconsin continues to beat us. The fact there are a lot of people who would say Nebraska should have never gone to the Big Ten. They should have stayed in the Big 12. Poppycock. That's what I say to that. Poppycock. Balderdash. Those are the words I can use. But it hasn't been joining the Big Ten that has caused our downfall. Yeah. The choice of really crappy personnel has caused Nebraska to have issues. It isn't anything to do with joining the Big Ten. So I think, I don't think it'll take us very long to hate Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. I'm thinking a year. I'm in for the hate. That's what I'm looking forward to. And all the doom and gloom can just, fly out the window.
All right, last thing before I got to let you go, I got to ask you about this. Volleyball Day in Nebraska is coming up on August 30th. How excited are you to be able to see this on the stage that it is? I've been been following on Twitter. Looks like the weather is going to be fine out there in Lincoln. How excited are you to be able to see this? And is this a Nebraska team that can go all the way and bring home a national championship for the Big Ten?
Oh, wow. That is so, I'm in Minnesota. It's the state of hockey.
Yes.
There are at least 10 hockey rinks within 5 miles of my house. All right. I understand hockey in the state of Minnesota. You go to Texas. It's the state of football. I have family in Texas. I was just up fishing with them in northern Minnesota last week, and they were showing me photos of some of their football stadiums and stuff. Yeah. My grandnephew was an MVP of soccer in Texas as a goalkeeper or something like that. Completely forgot where I was going. Volleyball, though, I mean, years ago, a coach named Terry Pettit started when women's volleyball started being an NCAA sport. And that guy built Nebraska into a volleyball powerhouse. And the number of young women who have gone through volleyball in Nebraska, the number of coaches we put out into the world, Nebraska really is the state of the volleyball. And I think it's an excellent sport. It's beautiful to watch. I think it was my favorite. All the photos behind me are photos I took when I was doing photography. Volleyball was, it literally was my favorite sport. I mean, football, obviously, but volleyball was so fun and exciting, and it's fast. And I'm glad that Nebraska put it on this stage because it's a sport that, I kind of go weird here for a minute. When you turn on your TV, we were having the discussion earlier in our Slack room about how many of us would own YouTube TV if it wasn't for live sports. And the fact is nobody would.
Nobody would.
Right. So when you look at the channels you're going to look at, or the selections you have, and you look through this stuff and you go, wow, that's how many hours does it take you to pick a Netflix movie? All right. Volleyball is an excellent live sport. Live sports over the next few years are going to be worth way more money than they are now because they are always exciting. They have that emotion attached to them. They're not scripted like everything else pretty much everything else we're dealing with in terms of entertainment. But I had volleyball for Nebraska. It's excellent to see them do this. And as far as this year's team, man, volleyball is an unbelievably competitive sport in the Big Ten.
Oh, it's the best.
I mean, Wisconsin has won the Big Ten in 4 years in a row, and that's just not right. They're obviously cheating. And then Texas bought their national title last year with two young women that transferred from Nebraska to go down to Texas for nil reasons. Yeah. I mean, I could say unfriendly things about Texas, but I do have to kind of respect them a little tiny bit for doing that, but can Nebraska go all the way? I hope they're in the Final Four. I think that's like being in the Final Four of basketball. Boy, you were going to ask me about predicting the Big Ten West.
Yeah, lastly, who wins the West? Who wins the West? Who wins the East? Who brings home the old Big Ten title this year?
Okay. I have to take a breath. Cleansing breath. It's a cleansing breath. I was going to actually say Iowa, as much as I hate Iowa. But, the news today with who is it? Shannon, their defensive lineman. Yeah, being suspended by the NCAA. I know there's a lot of Iowa fans on Twitter going, why are they only investigating us? Well, it was your gaming commission that started the investigation. So that's why they're not investigating a lot of the people, because Iowa can't go over to Nebraska and investigate them. But I don't know how deep that's going to go. But Iowa, when you look at Iowa, you all love to make fun of Brian and his 25 points a game thing. But let's face it, you try running an offense with Spencer Petras.
Good luck.
I literally, they didn't have quarterbacks. You could look at him and say, the guy's been there for 20 years. Why isn't he recruiting better quarterbacks? But I think when you look at their team and their schedule, I think they were set up to really probably win the Big Ten West this year, but we'll see what happens with the gambling. And after that, it's, I don't know, Minnesota, if PJ could actually beat Kirk Ferentz. I think he's 0-7 against him as a coach and 0-1 as a player. That's kind of freakish. And when you watch their games, you could see them screwing with each other all the time. It's really interesting. It's a really bizarre relationship they have. So could Minnesota win that? Well, I watched a little bit of your guy before, and you said 6 of them. I'm not sure about Purdue. I think they just have too much, they have too much to overcome. What do they have? A Hudson Card at quarterback?
Hudson Card, Backaby in the backfield.
That kid is crazy. I love watching that guy play football because I remember trying to tackle guys like that, and you were terrified that they were going to ram their knee.
Get really low.
Yeah, you just didn't know where to hit them because they're flying all over the place.
Yeah.
But I think Purdue's got too much to overcome. Northwestern has destroyed their program. Wisconsin's like Nebraska. Nobody knows what's going to happen there.
So who wins the West?
What? I answer that?
You didn't make your pick yet. You're just going through all the teams right now.
I am. I thought it was going to be Iowa until the gambling thing, but you know what? I'll go bold and say Minnesota.
Minnesota. Who wins the East?
Michigan.
Michigan. So you got the little brown jug again, and then who wins the Big Ten championship?
Michigan.
Michigan wins it. So we got a little brown jug rematch in the Big Ten championship, according to John.
One thing about the East, I'll say the Penn State finishes above Ohio State.
Yeah, they're good. They're good.
Yeah.
They're good. Yeah. All right, John, thanks for being quickly before you go. Where can people find you? Now is your time to shine. Keep it family friendly, though, okay?
Oh, well, geez. I mean, I'm Corn Nation on YouTube, Corn Nation on Twitter, cornnation.com. I mean, it's pretty much Corn Nation all over the place.
All over the place. John, thanks for being with us, and good luck to the Huskers this season.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, we continue to press on through this edition of Big Ten Ted Live here tonight. And right now, I am pleased to be welcomed by that man, Mr. Ken Peterson from the Casual Big Ten podcast. Right now, we're just going to relax a little bit. We're going to get nice and casual here as we continue to go on throughout the show. Kent, thanks for being with me here today. So you got a podcast over there, and you got Twitter as well. And sometimes, as we know about podcasts and we know about Twitter, not everybody's going to agree with you all the time. What's the Big Ten take you would say that you get the most heat over on the interwebs?
Man, I don't even know where to start. It's like, is that question like ever or like just
right
this
now?
week?
Right now, yeah.
I would say that in the last couple of weeks, so I did a quarterback rankings of all the guys that are supposed to start this year, like week 1, and I got a ton of pushback because I had Luke Altmaier at 13 out of 14 in the Big Ten, and I get pushback on a lot of stuff, but the problem is it's not really a problem. I enjoy it. Whenever you're doing any sort of preseason rankings or any rankings of any sort that are, that can be interpreted any way. Like it's not just based on like who's the leading rusher, who's the leading passer. And in preseason, there's a lot of that. So anytime you do that, the fan bases of the teams that are near the bottom are always going to be upset. But the fact of the matter is there's 14 teams right now, and somebody's got to be 13, somebody's got to be 14. And I got a lot of pushback on Luke Altmaier. I've gotten a lot of bad messages about how I think Minnesota is going to finish this year. And just, I mean, it seems like it's weekly. Like I said, anytime that you put somebody that's just your opinion near the bottom, I mean, I did like a jersey rankings where I just like picked my favorite jerseys, and people were upset about that. And even people that were like near the top, they were like, we're not even the best jerseys. It's like, well, man, I can't make anybody happy, but it's all fun. Like, that's why I call it Casual Big Ten. To me, it's just like for fun. And it's just to get the conversation moving and keep it moving. And that's why I do it. And it's been fun for me since I started it last year.
So let's talk about Minnesota, because that's the kind of one area where maybe people have gotten on you just a little bit, and we can kind of go back and forth on this a little bit. First of all, where do you kind of have, predicting wise, where do you have Minnesota finishing kind of record wise and standing wise in the Big Ten West? And then why do you feel that way? Kind of back it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I put out my predictions way earlier than a lot of other people did. I tweeted them out on June 1st, and obviously a lot of things have changed, especially in the Big Ten West since then. And originally I had Minnesota finishing last in the Big Ten West. And obviously Minnesota fans weren't happy about that. And again, this is like there's 7 teams, so someone's going to have to be at the bottom. Since then, I have I actually did a whole series where I interviewed someone from that covers like each school and kind of got their feedback on everything. I had like an awesome interview with Minnesota. I had an awesome interview with Northwestern, all sorts of guys that have a little bit more insight about some of this stuff than I would just originally by myself. And I still keep Minnesota pretty low in the Big Ten West, but I don't have them finishing last anymore. I'd still think that they're around 5th in the Big Ten West. And my big reasoning why, and I was just listening to the previous guy from Corn Nation talking about how he thinks Minnesota's going to be really good. And I just don't, to me, I just don't see it. I understand they have PJ Fleck. Great
What would you
coach.
say is the weak point of the Gophers? So you feel this way, and when you look at fifth right now, you could see, I'm just listing off teams: Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Nebraska. Okay, is it the most impossible thing that those teams finish above Minnesota? No, I don't think that's impossible there in that particular situation. Northwestern, maybe that's a little bit of a different story when you had them last there. But what is it about Minnesota, right? Because a lot of people think that maybe this is a team that will get better and be better in 2024 than it is in 2023. But in your opinion, what is it about Minnesota why you're not as high on them as maybe some other people are?
I mean, to me, it begins and ends in the backfield. I mean, I look around the Big Ten, and almost everybody improved at quarterback, with the exception of, I think, Minnesota and Illinois. But the difference between Minnesota and Illinois, to me, is that Illinois' defense is just so much better than theirs, I think, personally. That's just my opinion. Again, it's preseason. It's just an opinion at this point. And then you go right behind the quarterback position, and you look at, if you're a Minnesota fan, you're relying on a MAC running back right now to be your guy, Sean Tyler.
Good MAC running back, though.
He's a good running back. I'm not debating that at all. He put up great numbers at Western Michigan. I'm not debating that. He's a very good MAC running back, but the Big Ten is very different than the MAC. Yep. And he hasn't seen Big Ten defenses, and he's not – I'm not going to say he's not ready, because he could come in and be great. He's going to have a better offensive line than he ever had at Western Michigan. So he could come in and be great. I understand that. But he hasn't been yet. And to me, the fact that Trey Potts decided to leave to go be the number 3 guy at Penn State really said a lot. I don't know. That could be just me reading into it a little bit too much. I understand he wanted to go back home and be closer to home and things like that. But when you can be the guy at Minnesota, and Trey Potts, to me, would have been the guy this year had he stayed.
Probably, yeah. Yep.
And he decided, I don't want to do that. And now you're relying on the running back position. I just think both of those, just the whole backfield, with the quarterback and the running back position, I just don't think that they're going to be able to put up enough numbers in the West that they're going to need to put up against those really good defenses to be able to finish in the top 4.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. Boy, what a running back room now that Penn State has with Trey Potts as the number 3 over there as well. A pair and a spare, no question about that here right now. Okay, quick thoughts here. Who wins the East? Who wins the West? Who wins the Big Ten championship in your mind?
For the East, it's like really hard. It's always really hard when you have the 3-headed monster. You have Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. And for me, obviously, the easy pick is just to say Michigan. They've won it the last 2 years, so it's easy to just say that. I like to – maybe I'm just a little bit hopeful that things change a little bit and we get like a little bit of a mix-up. So I've selected Penn State to win the East this year. Like you just said, their huge backfield that they have. They really have 4 running backs that can play the spot. Yep. They have a freshman named Cam Wallace. I'm sure you already know about him, but other people might not. He's going to be really freaking good. And then you have Drew Aller, who's like highly touted quarterback. I just think he's ready. I compare Drew Aller to what J.J. McCarthy was going through a little bit last year, where he had 1 year where he played in a lot of games, didn't play a lot of minutes, but played in a lot of games, and he has time under his belt, and now it's his team. Kind of like it was game 3 for Michigan last year when J.J. took over. I think he's ready. I think Penn State is ready. Their defense is going to be really good. They get Michigan at home. They have to go to Ohio State, but I think that that's a winnable game with what Ohio State has going on. So I see it going in the East: Penn State, Michigan, and then Ohio State. That's the top 3 in the East. And then in the West, I'm going with Iowa. I think that Iowa, they have a Big Ten championship quarterback now. Caleb Johnson is a legitimate running back who's going to be able to – things are going to be way more open for him this year. I understand they got the same offensive coordinator still, but when you have Cade McNamara, a lot of things change for you as a running back as well. So I like Iowa, but I wouldn't be surprised if Wisconsin wins the West either. Yeah. That's not going to shock me. But to me, there's a lot of separation between those 2 and then the rest of the West. And again, that's just my opinion going into it, because then you're looking at Illinois, like I just mentioned, Minnesota. Purdue is going to, I think, struggle a little bit this year. So I like Iowa versus Penn State. in the Big Ten championship, and I don't think anything's going to, as much as I want things to change as far as who's winning each division, I don't think anything's going to change in the championship. It's going to be the East team. Penn State's going to win the Big Ten this year. That's how I see it.
And the last thing quickly before you go, thoughts on the West Coast expansion realignment coming to the Big Ten next year?
I'm excited about it. Obviously, I was excited even before we added Oregon and Washington.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because we're going away from divisions. Not that I didn't like divisions, but I do like the fact that the top 2 teams will be in the championship game going forward instead of someone. I mean, you look at the last couple of years, especially, like the team coming out of the West really had no shot. And I'm more excited about that. The fact that the number 1 and number 2 teams will be playing, I think, is how they're still going to do it now. I mean, if you add 2 more teams, it's almost like you got to go back to divisions and have 2 10-team divisions. But I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about it for football, but also for basketball. Just the late night Thursday night game in Oregon. Rutgers is there. I mean, nothing's better than that, right?
Oregon Rutgers, that's what we all want. Quickly, before you go, where can people find you? Where can people see you? Podcast, Twitter, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's at Casual Big Ten. And then, of course, I have my podcast, so you can listen to that anywhere. Just started the YouTube channel, also Casual Big Ten on YouTube. Would love for anybody to slide over there, start listening to that. On Friday this week, we're going to start our new series that's going to be weekly, and it's going to be called Bet Big, B1G. So we're going to be talking about all the gambling lines, all the sports betting that you should be doing, and giving everybody winners each week in the Big Ten for all those games coming out every Friday. So really excited about that. Come check it out.
All right, Kent, I appreciate you for being here today.
All right, appreciate it, man.
All right, we keep on moving on here, ladies and gentlemen, as the live show continues talking all things Big Ten football, as we do each and every single week here on this program. I am pleased to now be joined. We are chugging down the tracks all the way down to West Lafayette, Indiana. My guy, the big-time boiler here today, Grant Michael. I'm excited. We haven't talked in a little bit, and I wasn't super high on Purdue in February and March, but, the more time that goes by, I'm like, maybe they can do some things. How you doing? How's life in Boilerland?
Life is pretty good, Ted. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's kind of a mystery. And if you're not a diehard Purdue football fan, I can see where somebody would be lost with this team. It's almost a mini Colorado situation. 40 players out, 40 players in.
So I want to thank Grant for being here, because Grant hit the big time this week with his appearance on the Eyes on Big podcast. So thanks for being here with us little guys here today. I did a great job also on that show with Jeff and Kurt over there. All right, let's talk about Purdue a little bit. A lot of people are giving Hudson Card a lot of praise right now. How good can Hudson Card, do you think, can he be in this offense?
I think he can be pretty good. I think the air raid is tailor-made for his system. A lot of people go back and they kind of look at that Alabama game, which, he came in and stepped up. But I think a lot of people forget, he was on one wheel. He had a very bad ankle. But, yeah, I mean, he's being hyped up like crazy. He's been hyped up since he got here in the spring. And now, recently it's kind of getting to national buzz a little bit. I know Big Ten Network even today tweeted something out. Dave Rebson sent out that tweet. He looks legit. I mean, this is a guy that, was a very high 4-star, nearly 5-star recruit, was rated right behind a guy named Bryce Young. Maybe you heard of him out of Alabama. Right behind him. He's pretty legit. He's an accurate thrower and he can run. There was a highlight that Big Ten Network showed of him scrambling. He's got like legit 4.5, 4.4 speed. So it's pretty exciting to have a guy that actually can move like that and throw a ball. He's kind of like Aiden O'Connell light with wheels.
Right. And Aiden O'Connell doing some good things in a black jersey as well here right now. I had them, Purdue, at 6-6 right now. Is that where Boilermaker fans are kind of looking at for this team? Kind of maybe somewhere between 5 wins and 7 wins right now? What's a successful season for the boys at Purdue this season?
So honestly, I think 6 wins would be a successful season. getting to a bowl game, especially with the schedule. I mean, this schedule is crazy when you kind of break it down and really get into it. There's a lot of things that can happen. A lot of toss-up games, but obviously you draw Michigan and Ohio State, which is not ideal. You go on the road to Virginia Tech, but I think 6 wins would definitely be a win for Coach Walters. I think honestly the floor is probably around 4 wins, and then the ceiling's probably somewhere around 8. But I did my prediction yesterday on my podcast, and I said 7-5.
Okay,
but I could definitely see 6-6 for sure.
yeah, it's a 6-6, and I look at some of those games. I had them close against Wisconsin, right, on that Friday night. That Friday night game scares me, right, for Wisconsin. Early in the season, who knows if the Badgers will have the kinks worked out by that point. But Friday night, Ross-Ade Stadium, the Ross-Ade Brigade is going to be jumping in that game. If you were to kind of pick a team kind of going down the schedule, I picked Illinois as maybe the team that Purdue can upset. Purdue's fared pretty well against the Illini over the last 20 or so years. But what's an upset do you think that Purdue can possibly pull on their schedule that you feel pretty comfortable about as of right now?
Yesterday I said it was Illinois.
Okay.
I don't know if that would necessarily be an upset per se, but I think, we've not beaten Wisconsin in like 20 years. So
Yeah.
I'm always going to chuck that up as a loss on the schedule until we actually beat them. But I think realistically, though, I think Purdue actually could get Wisconsin on Friday night. Would not shock me. Would not shock me in this case. That's game number 4. So if Purdue handles business in the non-con and goes 3-0, then I definitely think, they can take out Wisconsin, go 4-0, and there's a chance Purdue, goes 5-0 with the schedule and then loses 3 or 4 in a row. But the opportunity is there if they can handle business.
Let's talk about defense, because that's what Ryan Walters and Kevin Kane were kind of brought in to really bolster on this team. They've got some pieces across this defense. The safeties really stick out to me. Sanusi Kane and Cam Allen seems like a pretty solid tandem. Maybe one of my favorite names in the Big Ten, Jeffrey Mba, the transfer over from Auburn, I believe as well. I think he originally was from France or somewhere overseas as well. What should we be looking at for defense? Because I think this is a defense that's going to start out maybe average to maybe below average, but it's going to get better as this season goes along. Where do you see this defense right now?
So, yeah, what you got here is a lot of pieces. Again, a lot of transfers were brought in. They literally changed over the entire cornerback room. I don't think there was one returning player in Jamari Brown. He just left. In all indications, and I'm about to say this and people roll their eyes, but all indications he left because he got passed over on the depth chart and he blew up apparently at practice and he just walked out. That happened a couple of days ago. Yeah. So that's kind of good news, actually, if the newcomers are better than them. If you look, so I just did an exercise where, and I know recruiting rankings kind of, or whatever, but sometimes it means something. This defense is actually full of a bunch of 4-stars, big time recruits. Now, some of them haven't exactly panned out, but the talent is there. And from what, Illinois' defense did the last couple of years, I mean, Ryan Walters, obviously he's coming over. He brings over Kevin Kane, the defensive coordinator for us. He brought over some other defensive staff from Illinois. I believe these guys can coach. If they can get the talent out of these guys, this defense, I don't think they're going to be a top 4 in the Big Ten or anything, but if they can even get, a 7th, 8th spot, I think, and this offense does pretty well, I think Purdue's going to be doing pretty well. But it's kind of the theme of the whole team, honestly. There's a lot of puzzle pieces. Yeah. We're just going to see if the staff, and I believe all the pieces are there to complete the puzzle. It's just, can we put them all in the correct spot?
So 2024, you talked about recruiting rankings. 2024 rankings, I believe Purdue has a top 25 class right now. And, we're in August right now. Of course, early signing day is probably about a little less than 4 months away. You've seen the Alabamas and some of the other teams kind of take their spot because sometimes early in the cycle they're a little bit low, but this is a solid class. I think that's what has me really excited about Ryan Walters here in the future when it comes to the Purdue Boilermakers. Let's talk about Devin Mockabee for a minute. There's a lot of great running backs in our league. No question about that. A lot of great tandems. Devin might be my favorite to watch. He's that bowling ball that is a bowling ball that can kind of dip and dive and duck a little bit throughout the defense. What makes Devin Mockabee so hard to tackle? What makes him such a good running back?
Well, they call him Crazy Legs and Soap. Those are 2 of his nicknames. And he's just, his vision is outstanding. His cutting ability is great. I mean, he's honestly kind of like a video game NCAA football kind of running back where he's just juking. And honestly, I mean, this is going to sound absurd, but if I'm going to compare him to somebody, it's kind of like how Barry Sanders used to run. I mean, he's just zigging and zagging and juking it. I mean, that one run he had against Minnesota was absolutely ridiculous, where that 68-yarder basically to seal the game, where he cuts on a dime. And he's also a physical runner. I mean, almost sometimes too physical. I think there's a few times last year where he just started lowering his helmet and popping people, which he's got to be careful doing that this season because this is going to be the first year where he's the guy from day one, game one, and we need him to stay healthy. Though I think we have pretty good depth there, but keeping him healthy is going to be key, along with Hudson Card, obviously.
So we all know Purdue known as the cradle of quarterbacks, but you could really tout their wide receivers as of late these last few years. You go back to Rondale Moore, you talk about David Bell, and then Charlie Jones for the year that he was here. This year, it doesn't really look like there's maybe a standout guy as of right now. You got TJ Sheffield in there, you got Mershawn Rice in there as well. It looked like maybe Corey Gamage was maybe going to be a guy that could come up, but he flipped back to UCF kind of at the last minute. Who's that wide receiver on this team that you think can be that standout guy? Maybe they're not going to be a Rondale Moore or a David Bell right now, but who's the guy that could really establish himself as maybe the top target in this offense?
Well, probably the top target's going to be TJ Sheffield, who, is pretty underrated. He almost had 500 yards last year, 4 touchdowns. Corey Gamage, that I thought he would have been great in this offense. And then the other guy they brought in who has loads of potential, Jamal Adreen, who was a redshirt freshman last year, put up about 600 yards for FAU. He tore his ACL, unfortunately, in fall camp. I think TJ Sheffield's a guy. Deion Burks is a guy that he made, I think, Bruce Feldman's all-freak team. Guy has a ton of potential. They're really talking him up in camp. He can flat out fly, kind of actually got built like a Rondale Moore. They have a couple guys, and you mentioned Marshawn Rice, and they have another guy named Abdul Rahim Yassin, who was 2 very highly rated recruits, 4 stars that have they've had the injury bug at Purdue. Haven't been able to stay healthy. This is finally the second season where they're not coming off an injury. So I know Yassin especially, he might be the guy that it kind of breaks out. He had a really good game. If there's any Illinois fans on here in 2020 where he was coming off an injury, got in the Illinois game, and I think he finished like 80 yards, including like a 50-yard catch. And he's very talented. So I think there's a guy that's going to jump out. It's going to be Yassin. This kind of the guy that kind of breaks out. But they have a number of options. This room is very deep. But again, about the puzzle pieces, not to keep using that analogy, but can they fit? But I don't know. In this offense too, it's going to be pretty open. And another guy I'll throw out there too is Garrett Miller, who I think is an extremely talented tight end, somebody that's being slept on, more talented than Payne Durham. Honestly, probably Purdue. If he tore his ACL about a year ago this time, if he returns to fully healthy, he's going to be an NFL draft pick, and he's an absolute stud. 4.4 speed and can catch, great hands.
I did hear that about Garrett Miller as well. So that's saying something, and we know how good and the numbers that Payne Durham was able to put up. Very exciting times in West Lafayette. So do you have favorites in the East? Do you have favorites in the West? Or what are you kind of looking at in terms of how you view the Big Ten going down this year?
Well, I'll just jump to the East real quick. I think, Ohio State not having the quarterback situation figured out is a pretty big deal. Some of these predictions are the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten. People are automatically throwing the Ohio State quarterback in the top 3, but I don't know if that's the case. So I'm going to have to go Michigan in the East with maybe Penn State too instead of Ohio State. We'll see how that works out. But honestly, I think the West is kind of an absolute mess. I don't know how anyone can say, it's kind of, I think it's going to be like last year where you legitimately have, 5 or 6 teams kind of battling. I mean, Northwestern's Northwestern. I think they're, obviously going to be pretty far down, but if I had to give you one, I would probably say Iowa, but if Cade's not healthy, the question marks abound for every single one of these West teams. It's kind of crazy. It's honestly, it might be the most exciting, at least for me, division of football, just because it's so open.
It's fun. People can say what they want about the Big Ten West, but there's one thing you can't deny. It is fun to watch each and every single week. One last thing before I let you go. It's not my favorite topic, but I talk about. I know it's not your favorite topic as well, but we've got 4 West Coast schools coming into the Big Ten. That's the reality in 2024. What's kind of your thought of the Big Ten expanding out west from a Purdue point of view?
So I'm kind of an old school guy. I mean,
Yep.
when the USC UCLA news broke, actually, I was kind of excited. It was kind of cool. But I have a cousin that's a beat writer for Ohio State that was a diehard USC fan. So they used to hate on the Big Ten, so now it's funny they're joining it. But the Washington and Oregon thing to me was at that point, I'm kind of meh about it. It doesn't do much for me. But it is kind of nice, I guess, to have 4 West Coast teams instead of just 2. But hopefully at this point, we're done for a while. But I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. But I'm just glad football's here and we can stop talking, hopefully, about the realignment talk. I'm pretty sick of it.
We'll wait till they come in next year, and then we can talk about West Coast football on the field as it pertains to being in the Big Ten. Quickly, where can people find you? Where can people subscribe to you? All that sort of stuff. Go ahead.
Just the Big Time Boiler on YouTube, a Purdue Central channel, and then on Twitter. Well, I was going to say Twitter, but I guess it's X now. Just the Big Time Boiler.
All right, we appreciate it. He's going to be having live streams, all sorts of good Twitter content as well. Grant, thanks for being with us here tonight.
I appreciate it, Ted. Thanks.
All right, that is Grant from the Big Time Boiler joining us here right now. All right, folks, we got one more guest. And if I could show you my pockets, they'd be empty because I pulled out the budget and I pulled up the old Big Ten Ted budget and I emptied out my pockets to get on our next guest. He is a 2-time Rose Bowl champion head coach. He's the former athletic director at the University of Wisconsin. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the Don of Wisconsin Badger football. He is Scary Alvarez. Scary, how you doing tonight?
Doing really well. You hear me?
I got you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and what an absolute pleasure this is for you.
For me, yes. Like I said, I got no money left. We spent the absolute last pennies of our budget to get you on the show here tonight. So one thing that you were kind of known for when you were coaching Wisconsin, physical, classic Big Ten football. Now Luke Fickell comes in, Phil Longo comes in, Tanner Mordecai comes in. And how do you say your legacy is kind of going the other way at Wisconsin? Were you a little hurt by that, or kind of how are you feeling about the offense kind of getting opened up here a little bit more?
Well, first of all, let me backtrack. You said 2-time Rose Bowl champion. It's 3-time Rose Bowl champion. Just want to make sure we had that.
1994. Yep.
That's a big one. So that's a really good question. It's a question that a lot of people, it's kind of the thing that a lot of people are saying around the league, but the reality is boots on the ground. You probably saw this. I've gone to a lot of these practices just because I'm very self-effacing and don't want to, get in the way and just kind of sit in the bleachers. But the Wisconsin offense is going to open up. I know you're going to see 3 wides. Sometimes you're going to see 4 wides. This is still going to be situationally, and maybe even more than situationally, a smash mouth team. People don't think that's going to happen, but Longo has this reputation. Air raid is such a divisive term for the offense he's bringing in. But what Longo has made very clear since he was hired on by Fickell is this offense is going to give what the defense is taking. He's going to take what the offense is giving. And if that means 2 100-yard rushers in a given game, it's going to be Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi going for 100 each. If it's going to mean opening it up because they're trying to stack the box, they can do that. Yes, of course, it's going to be more open, but I feel very confident. Other than the use of the fullback, that's going to tail off. But other than the fact that we're going to have more passing yards, this is still going to be in many cases a very traditional looking Wisconsin team, except for just a lot more points.
Yeah, I just don't see. I think a lot of people say, well, they're going to open it up. They're going to throw it 40 times a game. I think it's hard for me to imagine. I think it's going to kind of go the opposite. I really saw in that spring game where after Tanner, maybe he did throw a little bit more than a couple interceptions. They really got it going with Braylon Allen. I think it's going to open up a little bit, and instead of running against 9-man boxes, maybe there's 5 guys, 6 guys, something like that in there as well at the University of Wisconsin. So I got some other questions for you. Of course, you were in Madison for a very long time here, Scary. Who is your favorite Badger that you coached during your tenure?
That is a very difficult question because I have so many. The favorite Badger that I didn't coach is Jake Ferguson, who, of course, is going to be the breakout superstar tight end for the Dallas Cowboys this fall. It's going to be fun to watch Jake. So many. I mean, there's so many names. Matt Bernstein and rest in peace, Brent Moss. Of course, Ron Dane. It's one of those things where I was, as you might have heard, I was very tough but also fair. And some coaches have players 10, 20, 30 years later that will cross the street and not look them in the eye when they see them again. I think like Tommy Tuberville or some of that kind of coach. My guys, I would sit down and have a spotted cow with 15, 20, 30 years later. And it's that kind of camaraderie, I think, that, kind of going on to your initial question, there's still going to be a Wisconsin tradition. It's still going to be that feel. Yes, Fickle's in, but Fickle really came in and embraced that thing. I'm not saying he's not going to make his own mark. He certainly is. He has his own way of doing things. But the squat fest and the weights and the hard hitting and the toughness, this is stuff you get from an ex-Ohio State guy, from a guy who's an absolute grinder, grew up in Ohio, defensive lineman. This is not going to be any sort of fancy foo-foo champagne 7 wide out kind of offense. This is still going to be the tough guys who give the maximum effort are going to get playing time over guys who don't. That's just the way it's going to be with Fickle. So I'm really excited for this season.
Okay, so I saw a picture on Twitter. You're sitting there in the McLean Center on the sideline. You're watching practice, and you got new Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti over there as well, because you had to give him some advice. I know you did. You're the ever-knowing Don of Wisconsin football. What advice did you give Tony Petitti on how he can take the Big Ten in a better direction going forward? I
said grab Cal and Stanford for the academics and for the water polo.
The water polo.
I think that's a segue into a question you asked a couple of your other guests, is the Big Ten expansion. I was a little bit surprised, maybe not so much for the athletic department part of it, but the Oregon-Washington picks instead of what I would consider a more traditional Big Ten, Stanford and Cal. I know it's about the money. I know it's about football, the revenue sports. I get all that. So it's not a crazy decision from the money standpoint, but I really think that we'll see what happens here, but it wouldn't shock me if Stanford and Cal rounded out the Big 20.
Yeah, and that could get decided pretty soon, considering what's happening maybe with their ACC courtship as well and the whole Notre Dame stuff. All right, so I'm originally from Wisconsin. I've been to Madison a lot, and I'm very curious. I've had a lot of food in my day, and I've had a lot of burgers specifically in my day. The very best burger I think that I've ever had came from Dottie Dumplings Dowry down there in Madison. What are some other great places? I'm going to first start with State Street. What's your go-to on State Street on a Badger game day?
I would go to State Street Brats, and it's not just for a burger, but it's the atmosphere. It's a place where the real fans go. I mean, yeah, you got some drunk frat boys there. Sometimes the KK's too full, but that is, if you're visiting Madison for one day and you got to go to one bar and kind of get a vibe for what the real ones do, that's the place that I would go. And the food is actually really good too. It's not just good because you're drinking a lot. It's actually really, really good because they care about it and they have good chefs. By the way, Dottie's, if you wouldn't, with obviously the athletic department ties to the other ones, Dottie's is just a fantastic place to eat. And so close to the Kohl Center, obviously, you can just hop right in there.
All right. It's been a while since I went to Dottie's. I was going to say next, what's the best place on Regent Street? I couldn't remember if Dottie's was on Regent Street, but what's your go-to on Regent Street?
Dottie's is on like Johnson, kind of near Francis.
Yeah.
Regent Street, and this is what's tricky for me because there used to be a nice Taco John's there, but I don't eat a lot that's not catered. You might know as the Dawn, I have some of the finer foods brought to me. If I want to make rib or something, I have my unpaid intern Joe Ferguson bring it to me. But it's just crazy because I mean, as the Dawn of Wisconsin football and sort of the godfather of the Big Ten at this point, I'm getting food questions. This is great. I mean, I appreciate that I'm a tastemaker. This is kind of it's flattering.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I love Madison. I love Madison. I think it's the best. I haven't been to. I shouldn't say, but maybe I should say this a little bit later when I do visit every Big Ten town. But I love Madison more than any other town. What do you think is the best part about Madison when it comes to a college town perspective and when it comes to a game day atmosphere?
Yeah, the best part of it is just that, except for maybe some of the very dark days of winter, when that's the whole Big Ten really, when it's bleak and it's cold, and there's still some fun stuff to do if you like drinking. Madison, you walk out your door and there's 100 things you can do. Whether it's sports, biking, trails, zoos, museums, shows, art galleries, walking. It has everything. I know you hear things like Ann Arbor and Bloomington. There's some nice cities. But those are others receiving votes, in my opinion, as far as the best city in the Big Ten. Minneapolis doesn't count because it's not a city and has a campus for people to take buses in and stuff. It's fine. But Madison, it's a beautiful place with a lot going for it. The game, and it was the other question on game day?
Yes, on game day. Yep.
Yeah, on game day. And again, I hate to give props to Ohio State. They have some incredible tailgating. I'm not sure if you've ever been down to Columbus. It's just, it is some of the best, assuming you don't get beat up by the fans. Texas fans would gladly give you some stories from their game there in 2005. But Columbus has an incredible thing. But as far as just the game day, you can find a good tailgate somewhere here. They have all kinds of parking lots where it's opened up, lot 60, or just walk. You can walk by, see a house with a porch, and just step up on there, and they probably give you a beer. They're probably drunk enough they're not going to care, but they'll give you a brat, they'll give you a beer, they'll give you a spotted cow or something. And it's kind of wherever you go, everyone's a friend. Now, maybe you lose at home to Illinois by 20 plus points in a game you probably shouldn't have. Things can be a little bit, they still feel. So this is a very, very it's a fan base that feels. So last season, 2022 was a very difficult year for Wisconsin. I'm trying to segue us back into football here to see that this was just a trying time, but boy, is there a lot of optimism in that fan base right now. It's not overconfidence, because if you hear people talking about from outside, they think Wisconsin thinks they're gonna step in and do it. I think our fans are cautiously optimistic because there's been a few down years. We want to see how it's going to go. We've seen the signs. We see a lot of reasons why we think it's going to be good, but we still have to see it just like everyone else. We still have to see how that's going to go up in Pullman, Washington in game 2, when every single Pac-12 fan wants Wisconsin to get the shit beat, like I swear, get the stuff beat out of them. Because the Badgers had a lot to do with that whole thing. Yeah. But it's going to be, we're cautiously optimistic is how I would say Wisconsin fans are right now.
Okay, so you've had a couple of guys since you were the head coach there roaming the sidelines in Madison. Of course, we had Brett Bielema. We had Paul Christ. We don't need to talk about Gary Anderson. But which one? Brett Bielema. Yeah.
Gary Anderson? I have no idea who that is.
Brett Bielema and Paul Christ. Which of those coaches? I think it's fairly obvious, but maybe it's not. One of them got fired. One of them is kind of competing against your old school right now. Which one of those coaches right now do you look more favorably upon?
More favorably, certainly yes. Paul.
Yeah.
Paul, and this isn't a Bielema hate fest. I mean, look, if you got a buffet you want to destroy, that's your guy, #1 draft pick. But I'm telling you, he can coach. Brad Bielema can coach. He did a hell of a job last year. I'll say it. I mean, he came in there. I don't think he's going to be as good this year. I think that was a little bit of a peak, losing the coach to Purdue. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why I think Illinois is going to have a little bit more of a down year. But he's there. That program's here to stay. They're never going to be bad again as long as he doesn't leave them in the dead of night for some inferior SEC team, which is always possible. He did that to Wisconsin. But Christ, I still can't explain what happened, but just sometimes you're there for too long. And it wasn't a ton of time, but he had it and then he didn't. And I wish Paul all the best, because you're not going to find many better human beings in the coaching profession. Humble but confident, and the kind of guy who put together that 2017 season that was a fourth quarter last-minute drive into Ohio State territory away from a college football playoff berth. Yep. He can coach. It wasn't a team full of 4- and 5-star guys. He took his players and did it, and they went and beat Miami in Miami's place in the Orange Bowl. So that wasn't so long ago, but boy, last season that felt like a long time ago.
Yeah, that was, I believe that was the turnover chain year at Miami, and that exactly didn't go the way of the Hurricanes down there in their own stadium. Okay, so I picked Wisconsin to take home the West, and Ohio State because of the tiebreakers to take home the East. Who do you think takes home the East Division title, the West Division title? Who's playing for the Big Ten championship this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not doing this there's no reason for me to suck up to you. I never sucked up to anyone in my life. I have the same two teams.
Okay.
Ohio State, I just think the biggest mistake you could ever make is writing off the Buck or calling them an underdog.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they've wilted under in a couple of games the last couple of years under the pressure of expectations against their rival Michigan. But let's not forget a really, really shady overturned targeting call against Marvin Harrison Jr. in the end zone. That doesn't happen. They probably beat Georgia, and they almost certainly won the national title last year. So we're going from some people talking about the job security of the coach there when they probably, I mean, with a coin flip, they were a college football playoff champion last year. I think Ohio State, quarterback controversy or not, oh no, which 5-star are we going to start? I mean, I think it's going to be okay. And Michigan has the burden of expectation now. Harbaugh is going to serve that grueling suspension against all those powerhouses early in the season. I hope they can make their way through that. But whereas Minnesota is a very talented, that was hilarious. Minnesota very talented. Michigan is a very talented team. I think I wouldn't be surprised a bit if they were third place in the East this year. I think Penn State's actually gonna have a really nice year, and I think Michigan might surprise some people. Let's turn to the West because I've been listening to a series of very, very nice gentlemen on before me in the show, and I no disrespect to any of them, but you did raise the question, who do you like in the West? And I kept listening for Wisconsin every single time, and kept hearing Iowa over and over again, as if getting the backup quarterback for Michigan, who's about a 54% passer, throwing 9-yard passes, is somehow going to transform the worst offensive coordinator potentially in college football history into some juggernaut. And then you put the distractions that Iowa's facing now. I don't even know what. It's not. I'm not commenting on that one way or the other, but it's going to be distractions, and there's some injuries. This could be one of those classic Iowa 8-4 teams. That's what I'm looking for from them. But as far as yes, I think I'm spoiler alert. I think the Wisconsin Badgers are going to win the West this year. I think that Wisconsin has the highest ceiling of any team in the West by a substantial margin. And the Nebraska guy is a nice guy. I like the beard. I like the way he talks. He's kind of a spitfire. But when he said Wisconsin and Nebraska are both just kind of trying to figure it out, I have to take a little bit of an exception to that, because even at the depths of Wisconsin's recent tough times, they were never anywhere near how low Nebraska was. Nebraska's hill was substantially steeper to climb. And while I think Rule is a very good coach, and he will eventually win a game against a ranked opponent, I think this is probably the year he does it. And Nebraska's I was not happy as a Wisconsin fan to see Rule higher. I think that's going to turn the program around. But I think Wisconsin is the easy choice.
Yeah, I like Wisconsin. You mentioned the ceiling, the potential that Wisconsin has right now with Mordecai, all those great receivers. And this might be, and I don't think it's a necessarily high bar, but I think this is could be the best receiver room that they've had at Wisconsin in some time. Can you name to me, I look at the depth that they've brought in, Chemredike, Skylar Bell coming back, and then you add in these transfers, C.J. Williams, Bryson Green, Will Pauling, etc. So this could be the best, deepest, however you want to say that, wide receiver room in Wisconsin history. Can you think of another Wisconsin wide receiver room over the course of history that kind of compares or maybe is close to what this wide receiver room could be in Madison this year?
Honestly, we've had a couple guys with potentially higher end talent, but I can say without hesitation, this is the most talent that's ever been in the room.
Yeah.
There were some of them, Abradaris and Toon was a good room. Brandon Williams and some of those guys. When you had him and Evans in the same one, and Chambers and Evans I think overlapped for 1 year. And even some of those, even 2017, when you had Quintez Cephas, and although he was injured late in the season, but you had Danny Davis, and that receiver room they put against the Hurricanes were a bunch of talented guys. But of course, there's still games to be played. Obviously, the whole season's ahead of them. But as far as raw talent, we're talking about guys who might be third stringers, that could have been started, could have been the leading receiver for Wisconsin teams in the last 5 years. That's how deep the talent is. No one is going to have a 1,500-yard season just because there's too many guys and doing too many things. But there are guys who literally may not scratch the 5 or the 3 deep who would have started for, let's say, a 2018 team. That is how good that room is. And I'm not sure if you're going this way. The group that makes me the most concerned, and it's not a deep level of concern, but it's just a question of how it will gel, is the offensive line. Mm-hmm. I think there's a ton of talent in that room. There's a ton of talent, but we've seen how practice has gone, and that's been there have been a few little nicks here and there, and the transfer center Jake Renfro that Fickle brought in from Cincinnati, unfortunately is going to be out a few weeks, and it might be 3-4 weeks into the season before he's right, and that was a big expectation. He was going to jump in, so we have Bortolini starting at center now. So it's a little bit of trouble on the line there, but we got some good coaches. Bricknell's a good dude, and we'll get it figured out. But you talked about this earlier. Braylon Allen is going to have holes like he's never. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. How refreshing to get the ball and not be hit 1 yard after you get the ball every single time you get it and have to squeak out 4 yards. It's just he has to be looking at this like a kid in front of a bakery window.
So where do you see, the Braylon Allen I can't remember, it was an interview recently. He put together his ideal Wisconsin running back. He mentioned Rondain's power. He mentioned guys like James White. He mentioned guys like Monty Ball. It seems like this year is going to be the last year for Braylon Allen, and then he's going to move on to the NFL. Where do you think Braylon Allen really stacks up in the hierarchy, in the history of Wisconsin running backs? There have been some really good ones. RBU in the Big Ten, as far as I'm concerned, at Wisconsin. Where do you think he ranks? You maybe don't have to slot him in at a specific number, but is there kind of a back in Wisconsin history that he's maybe on par with?
Yeah, and again, hate to waffle, but I think how this season goes is going to factor into that.
Okay.
But let's project a nice 12, 13, 1,400-yard season from him, stays healthy, punches in a number of times. I'm not sure there's a back that's exactly like him, but he compares his running. I don't want to say Brett Moss because they're different games, but it's kind of a combination of Moss and Fletcher from way back in '93, because he has great speed. And Moss never had the high-end speed that Braylon Allen does. So he's almost like an ideal combination of those two Rose Bowl '93 backs that were, that sort of complement each other. And Ches Malusi, who kind of has his own style, is a really solid back in his own right. But I would think if Braylon Allen stays healthy and has the season that we were all expecting him to have, I think he is a top 10 Wisconsin running back of all time. I think I'm not going to say where on that list, but he's a guy that you pick in those first 10 picks.
It's crazy. You think of mentioning top 10, you could say 9, 8, 7, something like that. You think of a guy like that and you say, well, at most schools, he might be top 5, top 4, top 3, something like that. But it just goes to show you the great history that Wisconsin has had at the running back position. So we've talked about what you think is a Big Ten. We've talked about realignment. We've talked about it all here today. Scary. Do you have a final record prediction for where Wisconsin will end up? I was sitting at 9-3 with losses to what I have. Illinois, I had a loss to Ohio State, and I'm sorry, I had a loss to Minnesota at the end of the year. What do you think record-wise where this team could stand this year?
Yeah, we don't have to go game by game, but one thing that people, and this isn't to denigrate the Badgers, but one thing people are missing here is next year's schedule is a woodshed for the Badgers. It's not going to get any better in probably the history of the next 10 years than this year's schedule. It doesn't mean they're not tough games. They have Ohio State at home. They have Minnesota on the road. There are traditional rivalries. Washington State's not going to be easy, but this is as good as it's going to get next year. They got Bama, Penn State, Ohio, Michigan. It's just going to be a gauntlet that Wisconsin has. So give them a little bit of boost of having a little bit easier record than maybe like a Minnesota or an Iowa or a Purdue this year. I think I see Wisconsin. You want to go ceiling floor? I mean, that might be an easy way to do it. I think their floor is a 4-loss team. Who knows? There's a lot of, maybe it just doesn't click the way it is. The offense may take a little bit of time to get in full sync. I think Mordecai is going to be has a great arm, good head and shoulders, can move the ball a little bit if he needs to run. And I think that those receivers are fantastic. You're going to think this is me being a homer. I don't care if you think that, but I'm going to tell you, there is a scenario that's not totally implausible where Wisconsin runs the table in a Big Ten championship game against Ohio State. I don't think 6-6 would be a miracle. I mean, these people are not. These people are bananas. These people are not serious. They're not serious fans if you say 6-6 is a miracle.
I think Tony's a Gopher fan. I think
a Gopher fan. Well, look, let me tell you something. The Minnesota Gophers have 2 college football playoff championships the last 2 seasons, and those are the wins they had against Wisconsin because that's what that win is to that program. Wisconsin loses to Minnesota, they get their coach fired. Minnesota's coach goes 500 against Wisconsin. He gets promoted, and they build a statue. And by the way, PJ Fleck took over a 9-4 team, if you remember this 7 years ago, after 7 years.
Yeah.
He is now 500 in the Big Ten after taking over a 9-4 team with 0 legitimate Big Ten West titles, no major bowl games, and 3-3 against the chief rival. That to them is king-making material. That to a Wisconsin coach is embarrassing. So that's the difference between the programs. There it is. Send me the hate mail. I got it. I don't care. Minnesota, by the way, is going to be 6-6 this year.
6-6 for the Gophers would not surprise me. And you mentioned something before here. And I'll get you out of here in just a few minutes. But you mentioned about Nebraska, right, being down. They went 3-9 a few years back. I think last year was almost the basement for Wisconsin, and they went 6-6, won the bowl game, went to 7-6. I think that says something about where Wisconsin is right now and where they're going to go, kind of going forward. Well, Scary, I appreciate you.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Chris McIntosh isn't effing around. I mean, I set a pretty high standard, but McIntosh is making this his own thing. And when he went in, and I'm a Chris guy, but he did what he did. He brought in the guy he wanted. Nothing is guaranteed, but Wisconsin fans, like I said, are cautiously optimistic about the trajectory of this program. And by the way, for recruiting, it's just recruiting. But for rivals, Wisconsin, I believe there's the number 17 program in the country. They have 10 4-star recruits. 10 4-star recruits for Wisconsin has never happened before in the history of the program since the rivals era started. I think around 1990 or 2000. So he's up to recruiting. That's coming in without a full season to even do his stuff. So yeah, we're understandably excited. And you can have me on and I'll eat my words, but Wisconsin is going to beat Ohio State this year. I said it.
Okay, well, we might have to, no matter which way that goes, I think we might have to have you on after the Buckeye game over there. We appreciate you having you on. I grew up in Wisconsin, watching Wisconsin football for a long time. You're my guy. I appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Hey, where'd you grow up in Wisconsin? I have to ask.
I grew up on the foot of Lake Winnebago in the great city, well, not so great, of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. The hometown of Braylon Allen, by the way.
That's a saving grace. You got Braylon from there. The most fantastic. You talk about Braylon Allen. He is the best Big Ten running back that was a 4-star safety recruit.
Yes, he
Big
was.
Ten history.
Yep. Yeah, that's
awesome. Well, thanks for my time as always.
I got no more money left. I got to go back to work to replenish the Big Ten TED budget. Thanks again for Scary Alvarez for joining us here tonight. And that'll do it for our Big Ten prediction show. Holy cow. What a great show here tonight. It is going to be a fantastic season of Big Ten football. I cannot wait. Nebraska and Minnesota is going to kick things off. We've got some big things here planned on the channel this year. I think our next live show is going to come after because I'll be working the 31st. It's going to be on September 1st. It's going to be on September 1st, the day after that Wisconsin and Minnesota game. So those are my predictions. Tweet at Big Ten Ted with your predictions as well. YouTube comments, you know where to find each and every single thing. So thanks everybody for joining the show tonight. Thanks for coming aboard Big Ten Ted. Those are my predictions. It's going to be tough. I'm probably going to get a lot of them wrong. So until next time, I am Big Ten Ted, and we will see you in the next one.